Spider-Man No Way Home, one of the most anticipated movies of all time, especially if you are a Spider-Man fan and you kept up to date on all of the rumors and the reports going on about the movie before it came out. There was so much going on before this movie came out, so much being said about it. It was being talked about everywhere. Major trade companies, small trade companies, all the media outlets, everyone was talking about Spider-Man No Way Home and the rumors around the 3 Spider-Men possibly being in the film. This movie was hyped up like no other film there was. And I was a part of that as well. For those of you who don't know me that well, I'm Warren Thompson. I run the Marvel YouTube channel, The Cosmic Wonder. And this movie was super hyped. And that's what I want to talk about today. The hype surrounding Spider-Man No Way Home. When I was sitting in the theater at the world premiere of Spider-Man No Way Home, I thought to myself, is this movie going to live up to all of the hype surrounding it? That's the question I want to ask today. Did this movie get too hyped, or possibly did it not get hyped up enough? And there are 2 ways I want to look at this today. One is looking at it from the perspective of Spider-Man fans who followed YouTube accounts, Twitter accounts that updated on the movie, and another from the general masses, because the marketing is very different, right? So Sony, they pretty much let, the media companies, the YouTubers like myself, the Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts, they pretty much let them hype up the movie and hype up the 3 Spider-Men being in the film, because they did absolutely no marketing to the masses, to the normal everyday people who just, like going to see movies. They like Spider-Man, but they're not the true diehard fans, right? They didn't really do much marketing to them except for the villains returning, which is still, a lot. The old villains from the old universes returning, that's a lot. But there are 2 different avenues here, right? One is, the hype in the community was at an all-time high. I really do think that this was more hype than Avengers Endgame, which is really crazy, right? And depending on who you ask, that answer could change. But I personally think the hype around this movie was bigger than Avengers Endgame. Now, to the normal everyday person that perhaps sees the trailer on TV, I don't think it was hyped enough, because they have no idea what they're getting into. And I envy them, because I knew a lot about the movie. And we're going to talk about spoilers, obviously, in this. This is going to be, a review while we talk about if this movie was too hyped or not. But to the everyday person who just kind of sees the trailers on YouTube and on TV, and they go in, they're like, oh, cool, some of the old villains are going to be back. And then they see the 3 Spider-Men. Like, can you imagine, like, if you go in completely blind? Like, that had to be amazing. In which I would say the movie would not be, it wasn't hyped up enough for those people, because they didn't know what they were truly getting into. Now, for the people like myself, and probably you if you're watching this video, was it too hyped with YouTubers like myself and new rock stars and the Real Rejects, Heavy Spoilers, buddies of mine, Chris from 3C Film, all these guys, we all hyped up this movie so much, right? Were we wrong? That's the question, right? And let's talk about this. Let's talk about the movie. Let's talk about our true thoughts about the movie. Now, one thing I loved about this movie that I consider if it was too hyped or not was, the progression of the movie, the pacing of the movie. I feel like this film wasted 0 time. I never thought that this scene is unnecessary, or like, oh, I could have done without this scene, or, this feels a little bit too slow, or this feels a little bit too rushed. There was 0 wasted time for me. From the very beginning, where, it's with MJ and it's with Ned and he's webbing around, and then he's with the lawyers and they introduce Matt Murdock, Daredevil, to the MCU, which is insane, right? Like, all those scenes I truly loved. I liked watching the scenes where Peter struggled, not just with him not being able to get into college and stuff like that, and his life being bad, but MJ, Ned, Happy, May, like, that's who Peter Parker is. He cares for other people more than he cares about himself. And we saw that. And a lot of the scenes showed that. So I really loved every scene, because I think this was a true Spider-Man film. And of course, as we go through the movie, things get progressively better. we see the Doctor Strange fight, and it's insane. Visually, it's really, really cool. And then we kind of see Peter beat him. I mean, we do see Peter beat him. And it's really, really cool. And, prior to that, all of the villains showing up and like trying to figure out what it really is about, and them being confused and Peter being confused and Doctor Strange being, kind of terrified of this situation. That's all, it was all perfectly done. Nothing was wasted, right? They could have focused on some characters more, but I think if they did that, they would have had to take away from some other scenes. Like a lot of people are thinking like Sandman. He didn't get, too much. Same thing with the Lizard. They didn't get too much time, but I think they focused on the villains that they should have focused on: Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Electro. And I think if they took anything away from those villains to give to the other villains, it would have been less important by the end of the movie. But I still think Sandman and the Lizard got the time that they deserved. But then you get the 3 Spider-Men coming in, and it's just crazy from then, right? You get the Science Bros scene, which to me is just an amazing scene. You see 3 Peter Parkers, right? You don't see 3 Spider-Men, you see 3 Peter Parkers working together, which is which is absolutely insane. I think it was just so cool that we got that. But then they suit up, and then they fight together, and they're not used to fighting together. Right? Spider-Man typically doesn't work with a team. At least Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire don't. Tom Holland says he was in the Avengers, which is a really cool scene where Tobey Maguire's like, "You were Avenger? That's great. What is that?" Right? Like, I think the humor was on point, and I think, sticking with this main point right now, I don't think anything was wasted. I think all the scenes were very well thought out. I think the dialogue between everybody was really, really great. The pacing was great, and it made for a really, really great movie to where you didn't have to sit there and go, "Why am I watching this?" I never felt like that, but you enjoyed every single moment that was on the screen. Now, the action was on point. Like, really, I've been wanting this action from Tom Holland's Peter Parker for a pretty long time. The fights that he had with the Green Goblin were spectacular. The hand-to-hand combat, the use of the webs, the way the Green Goblin and his super serum would just show how strong he was, breaking through walls, breaking through the floor of the apartment complex, and then at the end where he's just beating the absolute snot out of the Green Goblin. That was all amazing. The fight with Doctor Strange, wow. I mean, amazing, right? We got web slinging action in this one, fighting Electro, and then, of course, where you have all 3 Spider-Men together, swinging together, fighting together. At one point in time, Tom Holland's Peter Parker swings in front, webs the 2 of them, pulls them, and they all swing together. They land together. They strike their Spider-Man poses. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man saves MJ. I mean, everything that we got from this one, Tobey Maguire stepping in to stop the glider, to stop Tom Holland from killing the Green Goblin, from losing that innocence that Peter Parker needs to have, that losing himself. The older Tobey Maguire steps in. Everything was just fantastic. Aunt May dying, as sad as it was a truly remarkable scene, which brings me to my next point. This has to be the most emotional Spider-Man movie to date, and probably one of the most emotional MCU movies. I definitely think it's one of the most emotional MCU movies. Maybe Endgame, because we lost Stark and we lost Natasha, Black Widow. That's hard, but this was like, when May dies, it hits you in a very, very different way. And Tom Holland did an incredible job at showing all the emotion in it, because you feel in this movie. You hurt in this movie, and then you feel for Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I was wondering how they were going to handle that, bringing him into the movie, and what I was hoping they would talk about Gwen, and he does, and he gets really emotional about it, really, really emotional about it, and you can actually tell that some of the dialogue between him and Tobey Maguire are about his franchise and him being Spider-Man in real life, where Tobey says, "You're amazing," and he's like, "I'm not going to lie, I needed that." Right? Like, you could tell that that's kind of like real. That was like directed at Andrew Garfield and his franchise, because not a lot of people like the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. But when he catches MJ and he's crying, I cried. Every time I've seen this film, I get teary-eyed in that moment. every single time. And I also want to just say that the three Spider-Men, watching them interact together, that's emotional for me as well, because that's my childhood. Tobey Maguire, and then Andrew Garfield, and then Tom Holland. It's all led up to the three of them interacting, and it's emotional. It really is. And it's like sad emotional and really happy emotional. It's just a whole wave of emotions that I think was perfect. Now, obviously the three Spider-Men was the greatest thing that could possibly happen in a Spider-Man film. I don't want to take away from Tom Holland's performance, because he was amazing. And this movie very much is about Tom Holland's Peter Parker, right? The other two show up to help him, and they guide him, and they coach him, and they tell them a little bit about their lives to help him, to help our Peter grow. And in which by the end, he makes, the Peter Parker decision, a true Peter Parker decision to not tell MJ and Ned everything, but to keep it to where they forget about him so they can be safe. Because he sees the mark on MJ's head and decides that, you know what? I'm not going to put my friends and my loved ones in danger. I'm going to let them live their best life, because now they can get into MIT and go to school and everything like that. And I'm going to be Spider-Man. And I'm going to, get my GED, go to college and do what I can, but I'm going to be Spider-Man. That's who Peter Parker is. That's who Spider-Man is. I'm glad they showed that. But the three Spider-Men together, oh my gosh, they crushed it. And here's my biggest thing about this. They did it in such an amazing way. And in the perfect way. They crushed it. It wasn't forced. It wasn't tacky. It wasn't just for fan service. Everything made sense. And it was perfect. They hit everything I wanted to hit too. Web blood, right? They're talking about like, oh, you produce it? Oh, I got to make mine, right? They did the pointing meme. It's like, Peter, yeah, you. Like, I mean, they swung together. I mean, it was fantastic. I think they executed it perfectly in a way that I don't think anybody could really say like, oh, they did it just to do it. No, there was purpose. There was purpose. And that was something I was concerned about having three of them in the movie. One was, is it going to be more of a movie about the three of them, or still just about Tom Holland? Because it is still his franchise, right? It's still the Homecoming series. And are they going to really try to force things? And is it going to be like no chemistry, right? But there was perfect chemistry. Everything was fantastic. And I think because of all these things, the movie was not too hyped. I think the movie was perfect. I think all of the things that have been said about it led us to this perfect film, in my personal opinion. This is my favorite MCU film to date now. It takes a spot for number one, and one of my favorite movies of all time. Truly. I loved everything about this film. And I think it was underhyped for the general population who isn't on YouTube all the time. And I think it might have even been a little underhyped in our community, because we only knew a little bit about the movie. And still, Sony never really confirmed anything, which I think was a brilliant move on their behalf. But I think if they gave us just a tiny little bit of a teaser of the three Spider-Men, it would have been even more. So I think the movie actually could have been more hype, but it definitely lives up to the hype that surrounded it before the movie came out. But let me know what you think. I'm going to give this just right. I think the hype for it was just right. Maybe a little bit more. It could have been a little bit more hyped, but I think the marketing was really good for it. I think I think not confirming it made you go in with like this feeling that's like, okay, I'm like 99% sure they're going to be in it, but that 1%, I gotta know. I think that added the excitement. So that's why I say I think this was just right. I think it was handled perfectly. I think Sony let the community do most of the work. They didn't confirm it, and when you finally went in, you were completely satisfied. So I think it was just right, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this review and this segment, too hyped or not too hyped, I got to figure out a title for it. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. I'm Warren Thompson, and thank you so much for stopping by my channel.